All right, today we're diving into a case that starts with some of the most horrific child abuse allegations you can possibly imagine. And then it takes a turn so sharp it becomes a hunt for a killer. This is a story of just unimaginable cruelty, a tangled web of lies, and a final twist that, believe me, nobody saw coming.
Just think about that for a second. That one sentence from a 15-year-old girl is what kicked off an investigation in Farmington, New Mexico, that would pull back the curtain on a story of unbelievable suffering happening right in our own backyard.
So let's meet the people involved. At the heart of all this is 15-year-old Georgia Jackson. Now, Georgia lives with autism and fetal alcohol syndrome. And she came forward with these absolutely horrific allegations of abuse against her own father, 58-year-old Jaime Jackson, and his girlfriend, 36-year-old Patricia Madrid.
On September 16, 2024, Georgia finally told her story to Child Protective Services. And what she described, it's just staggering. She talked about being locked in a chicken coop for more than 16 hours a day. She was being systematically starved and was only allowed to use the bathroom on this cruel, rigid schedule. You have to understand, this wasn't just neglect. This was a calculated, systematic campaign of abuse.
So when police show up with a search warrant, things get weird, and they get weird fast. Patricia immediately starts stalling them. She's claiming she can't find her keys, that the dogs are mean, just one excuse after another. But after a long delay, the officers realize it's a game. They finally force their way in, and where do they find Jaime Jackson? I kid you not, they find him literally hiding inside a futon.
So you'd think they'd be caught red-handed, right? Nope. In the interrogation room, both Patricia and Jaime deny absolutely everything. They try to spin this story that Georgia is just a troubled teenager who makes things up for attention. But as police started searching their home and, more importantly, their phones, the evidence began to paint a very, very different picture.
Their story starts to crumble almost immediately. When they're asked about locking Georgia in the chicken coop, they play dumb, claiming they have no idea what the police are talking about. But of course, police found a padlock and a chain on the coop door. And the real nail in the coffin? It came from their own phones. A text message from Patricia to Jaime that said, plain as day, build her a cage.
And then there was the whole hygiene issues claim. They tried to say Georgia was just difficult. Well, guess what? Their own text messages completely backed up Georgia's story. She was only allowed to use the bathroom at 7:45 a.m. and 5 p.m. Patricia had even texted Jaime, no bathroom for her, and told him to lock her out. It's all right there in writing.
As investigators kept digging through those texts, it just got darker and darker. This went so far beyond neglect, they forced her to wear a blindfold and earmuffs to deprive her senses. They withheld food, with Patricia actually texting, "Don't feed her until she's starving." They joked about her pain, they joked about how she looked, and then there's this one message from Patricia that just sends a chill down your spine. "I wish that was dead with her mom."
Okay, so with this mountain of evidence, it's all right there in their own words. Police had everything they needed. Patricia and Jaime were arrested. But right when you think this is where Georgia finally gets some justice, the whole case just gets thrown completely sideways. So on February 18th, 2025, they're arrested. But then something happens that just has the whole community screaming. They post bond. They're released from custody. And then just 8 days later, a panic 911 call comes in, and it changes absolutely everything.
Patricia Madrid, the woman at the center of this horrific abuse case, was now dead. She'd been shot and killed in her own driveway as she was getting ready to go to a court hearing for Georgia's case. The prime suspect in an abuse investigation was now a murder victim.
So now the police have a murder on their hands, and they absolutely know that the public is furious that Patricia was let out in the first place. The immediate theory, this had to be some kind of vigilante justice.
And pretty quickly, they get their first big break. A witness sees a man fleeing the scene on a bicycle. And not long after that, they get surveillance footage of that same person loading that same bike into an old blue pickup truck.
And guess who that truck belongs to? You got it. Patricia's ex-husband, Mark Sandoval. Mark had the clearest motive in the world. He'd called the police just days earlier, absolutely livid that his own daughter had been in that house with Patricia, and he was furious that Patricia had been released on bond. He immediately jumped to the top of the suspect list.
And when they bring Mark in for questioning, his rage is it's off the charts. He's yelling at the detectives, saying what a lot of people were probably thinking. A kid who got beat and tortured, and you guys let him out. He looked guilty as hell.
When the detectives tried to tell him to calm down, he just exploded. "My daughter was in that house. You tell me to calm down." everything. The motive, the truck, the rage, it all pointed directly at him. It looked like an open and shut case of a father getting his revenge.
So it seems like a done deal, right? The angry ex-husband gets his revenge. Case closed. But you know there's a twist coming. Just as the police are tightening the net around Mark, a single piece of evidence that they found with the killer's stuff, well, it just didn't fit.
So police find the spot where the killer ditched the evidence. They've got the bike, the gun, the jacket, it all matches. But they also find a pair of glasses. And this is where the whole case against Mark completely falls apart. Because when they checked the prescription on those glasses, it didn't match Mark's prescription. It wasn't even close. It was a physical impossibility.
I mean, that one detail throws everything out the window. If Mark wasn't the killer, then the man they had in custody, the man who seemed so obviously guilty, was innocent of this crime. So the question became, who was the real killer?
So the detectives go back to the drawing board. They have one last clue to follow. A pair of brand new shoes they found at the dump site. They trace the sale to a local Walmart the day before the murder. They pull the security tape, and the guy on camera buying the shoes, it's not Mark. It's his older brother, Matthew Sandoval, identified by a really distinct tattoo on his hand.
And that's when it all clicks into place. Investigators check the prescription from the glasses they found at the dump site. And what do you know? They were a perfect match for a pair that Matthew had bought a year earlier. The real killer had been hiding in plain sight the whole time, letting his furious brother take all the heat.
So in the end, here's how it all shook out. Matthew Sandoval was charged with first-degree murder. His brother Mark was cleared of any involvement. George's father, Jamie Jackson, is still facing 14 felony counts for the abuse he inflicted. And Georgia, the girl who survived this nightmare, was finally placed in the temporary custody of her maternal grandmother and hopefully finally safe.
When you look at this whole tangled mess of abuse, revenge, and mistaken identity, it's a lot. One of George's abusers is dead, the other is waiting for his trial. But it really leaves you with a tough question. After everything she's been through, and after seeing her own story of survival spiral into a murder plot, what does justice even begin to look like for a victim like Georgia?